on WFLA Now. This is Run for Fun with running enthusiast Leigh Spann.
All right, welcome back to the Stream Center for this week's episode of Run for Fun. We hope this show helps cultivate a love of the sport of running while also keeping it in perspective. There are ways to keep it fun and enjoyable, but there's such a wonderful way to stay fit and healthy that we can help you hopefully stay out of those pitfalls that can make it hard or worse, actually hurt you physically. So I'm your host, Leigh Spann. I'm the morning meteorologist at WFLA in Tampa, at least for a little while longer. But I've also been an avid runner for about 14 years now. And like so many people who've been running a long time, I often fell into those pitfalls. So I'm hoping that this show helps more people stay out of those holes. And of course, who keeps me out of them now is Coach Maria. So good morning, Coach.
Good morning. I try to keep people out of holes. That's what I try to do.
Those pitfalls, man. We will fall into those and
the regular falls, because everybody falls too. That's what happens.
Got a scar here from a fall.
Always falling. Yeah. We don't like that either.
That was my first fall, 4 stitches. If you're gonna fall, you might as well
do it right.
Might as well do it right. Sorry about your gecko experience today.
Oh yes, I definitely got assaulted by a gecko in Leigh's shower this morning, but
yes,
I survived it. Everything's okay. It definitely scampered down my body, and thankfully, it didn't register with me in time. It just is okay. It's okay. Geckos are cute, right?
They are cute. I mean,
I would have liked it in a British accent to tell me sorry. That's all I'm going to say.
That's how you can save 15% or more by switching to Geico and not suing me for the assault.
I was really hoping for that, but it didn't happen. So.
All right. So today, Maria's got her a perfect prop today because we're talking a little bit about coffee, or specifically caffeine, and how it impacts running. So that's why we've brought in our friend and local dietitian, Jennifer Patricca. And good morning.
Good morning.
And I wanted to show your shirt that you have on.
That's
so that
right.
was my Leigh Spann Run for Fun farewell 5K shirt. Sadly, we didn't get to have the 5K because of Hurricane Milton. Actually, there was a park that we had a permit to have the race, and trees. I mean, I saw some of the video. It's real bad. Al Lopez Park. There were lots of trees down, lots of debris, flooded. It actually flooded during Helene 2 weeks earlier, so that was still things that were messed up there. Then the trees all came down. Very similar to how a lot of people's homes were. So we didn't get to have, but we did turn it virtual, and I had some wonderful people come and pick up their packets. And then I got to talk to them at Fit to Run. So if you were going to continue to run it virtually, you were able to come by. I was able to chat with you. Those are some of my weather watchers. So that's Clay and Lakeland and Temenda and Plant City, if you ever see on TV. And of course, that's Pickles with my fantastic medal. Dave Yancey created these amazing medals. I was so excited to give them out to people, and it was so nice to talk to everyone.
That picture of Pickles is so cute.
I know. Mm-hmm. She only bit like 3 or 4 or 5 people.
That's good. Only.
Well, she sits so nicely on the table, and then people will say, "Oh, can I pet her?" I go, "Well, she's snippy," and then they say, "Okay," and then they pet her anyway, and then she snips at them. It's like,
it's funny. She's always so sweet to me, and then I always think, okay, I could. Now we've made it. Like finally made it with Pickles, and then just something I do is wrong, and then and I'm like, oh, never mind.
She's part cat, so she has. That's what cats do, right? Like they're fine and dine, and then all of a sudden they're not fine, and then they scratch. And so I think she's like a quarter cat, but but that's okay.
Would be interesting.
Jen has spent some time with Pickles. She knows that she's a finicky little thing. So anyway, I appreciated everyone who stayed with us, even though we couldn't have the actual race. I was glad to be able to talk. I think we talked to about 50 or so people came by.
That's awesome.
50 to 55 people came by. So it was wonderful. So like I said, I'm the morning meteorologist for a little while longer through November. So next week will be our last Run for Fun podcast.
Yeah, so sad.
It's been 2 years though.
I know, crazy.
Yeah. So and we may have some things in the works, but we're gonna have to reset my life. So that's all I left on
press
that.
reset first, and then we'll figure it out.
Press reset first. So with this happening in the morning, caffeine. Everyone likes their morning cup of Joe, and I know I get asked this question a lot. I'm sure Jen does, and Coach, can you have that cup of coffee before you go out and run? So that's sort of the basis of today's show.
I will tell you that I cannot start my run without my caffeine. Like I actually went a year without caffeine.
I remember that.
I did. And I never felt better in my life, actually, taking caffeine out.
So then why did you go back?
Sadly, it's because my husband brings me a cup of coffee every morning and I miss the ritual. Yeah. And I just love the smell and taste of coffee. And really but the reason I gave it up was because I was waking up in the morning and Luke one time forgot to buy more coffee at the store. And I had a literal 2-year-old temper tantrum, like crying. And Luke was like, it's a cup of coffee. And I was like, I don't ever want to be that dependent on anything.
Yeah.
And I was that dependent.
Do you feel like you've gone back to being that dependent, or are you?
Yes, if I'm being honest. But I do limit it to 2 cups a day. And I do notice a difference. And maybe Jen can explain why. When I drink a cup of coffee, I feel better when I'm running. If I don't drink a cup of coffee, I'm dragging. I can do it, but my run just doesn't feel as good. So I don't know if I've just gotten used to it. It's part of my ritual. That's what I do.
Well, what I tell people, having had no training like Jen or you, is I'm just like, if you always drink a cup of coffee, do it.
Yeah.
But don't start doing it, or don't take it away just because you're running. Because that's my general go-to answer when people ask me.
I would agree. And,
Okay.
you know, they've actually done some research that either you respond to caffeine, you know, positively like Maria or like myself.
Is that positive? I appreciate your optimism.
Jen, bring
on
the
that.
microphone. Jen, bring the microphone just a little closer to you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But so positively, or some people respond to it negatively. I know I was talking with my trainer yesterday and she's like, well, if I had coffee before a workout, like I feel like my heart would explode. So there are those people too. And then there are people that it just doesn't really show any benefit at all. But, you know, some of the benefits would be like increased alertness. So it might make you feel more awake. It also blocks an adenosine receptor, which then allows the good, happy hormones, so like dopamine and adrenaline, to increase, which that's why you feel that a benefit of, you know, you feel like you're working less hard than you really are. It's like a perceived exertion thing. So it's almost like it's, you know, playing with your mind, but in a good way.
And so I'm assuming that there's a statute of limitations. That's not really the right word, but like more is not always better.
Exactly.
At some point,
exactly.
Too much caffeine is going to make you have a bad run or
sure. And, you know, you want to make sure that you're adding it slowly in so that, you know, you kind of figure out how much you can tolerate. Like the other day I was online and someone was, you know, people always are asking for advice about things like, I've got my first marathon, what should I do? You know, and someone was like, well, I always do, you know, 2 coffees and 2 Red Bulls before I go run a marathon.
Gosh,
And I was
talk
like,
about my heart exploding.
I know. I was like, yeah, that's not good. But like specifically if you want a dosage, like from research, they show that 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram. So before and then during. So for those of you that don't want to do a lot of fun math this morning.
or deal with the metric system, right?
Right. So that would be like about 177 milligrams for a woman that weighs 130 pounds.
But like, doesn't coffee have like 100 grams? What is a typical cup of coffee?
It's a huge range.
Yeah.
So I asked Alexa this morning because I wasn't sure.
What did Alexa say?
Alexa said 94.
Okay.
Which it really does vary depending on, and that's, keep in mind that's 8 ounces. So like, you know, if you're getting like,
So like
a Starbucks
what size
coffee,
is this? This is like
it's a
That's
12.
12 ounces.
12.
Yeah.
I know that this has 360 milligrams of caffeine in it.
Yeah.
I stopped drinking grandes for that reason because I'm like, I can't sleep if I have, like they say, just not with exercise, but that you shouldn't have more than 400 milligrams a day, I think it is.
Yes.
That it's just, that's not good for you.
Right.
So if you have a grande, that's significantly over 400.
Right.
And like a Celsius has 200. That's like 2 Celsius or probably 2 Red Bulls. I would imagine that's pretty similar. But that's a lot of caffeine.
It is.
People don't realize it.
Right.
They don't. And what I was going to say was, so like the lighter roasts actually have more caffeine than the darker ones, believe it or not.
I've only recently found that out because I'm always like, oh, I'll go light. You know, no, it's not light other than color, right? That's the only thing that's light about it. So, but if you, one 8 ounce cup of coffee before you go for a ride is probably a nice start because maybe it's not 177 or it's not,
Sure.
but I know that I stay away from caffeine before because of my bathroom issues.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if the coffee, if some people do the cup because that makes
That's
them
me.
go before they
That's
go
right.
on their run. That has not been my experience.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. In working with clients, a lot of them have either IBS or they've got some GI issues going on where it's like, they have to go before, and if they can't, it's not a good thing. And so then you have to try to figure out, well, what's causing all of your GI issues? And caffeine's one of those that we address for sure, along with other things.
Talk to me about hydration in coffee, because I have read, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, that coffee actually can hydrate you if your body is used to a certain amount of caffeine. And if you go above the amount of caffeine that you normally drink, it can have diuretic effects and actually help make you lose water. But it still can be counted as a drink that will add hydration.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't necessarily heard that it will hydrate you, but I have heard that it won't necessarily cause that big of a diuretic effect.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I always thought about it too, is it's like it's only a diuretic if it makes you actually go to the bathroom more than you would have, right? So if your body
Depends
is
on
used
the
to
person,
it, so if
in
your
other
body
words,
is used to it and it's not making you go to the bathroom extra, it shouldn't necessarily actively dehydrate you, is what I've always kind of
Right.
thought. Yeah.
As long as you're keeping up with your hydration.
As long as you're
Yes.
also keeping up
Yes.
with the hydration.
Don't drink coffee just to be hydrated. It's not
Right.
going to work.
Right.
Jen says, please don't do that.
It does have water in it, though. So,
Yeah, it
So
does.
does beer.
yeah, that's true.
All things you probably shouldn't use to hydrate yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moderation, right? I feel like one beer would probably be okay. Even before.
I mean, I'm fine. If you tell me yes, I'm going.
We'll get back to you on this in the
Yeah,
next,
do not-
in the
yes.
next podcast. We'll talk about this.
So there are ways to have caffeine because I know not everybody loves coffee. Nobody, Maria loves coffee, loves the way it smells, loves the way it tastes. Some people don't.
I
But
love
so
it.
there are ways that actually runners can incorporate this that's not necessarily just drinking that cup of coffee, correct?
Sure. So a lot of your sports nutrition products, so like your gels, your gummies, blocks. Also, I've even seen it in some electrolyte supplements as well as some beverages too. But you need to make sure that you know how much caffeine is in each one of those. And then another thing too, like if you're looking for a sports nutrition product, I'd recommend looking for some kind of third-party certification. So like Certified for Sport or Informed Sport. That's just going to guarantee that the amount of caffeine has been tested and they show that like actually what's in the product is on the label and it's correct.
That's certainly blew up with the one brand that had so much fewer carbs that people were using. So, but same thing with caffeine. If you think you're getting 100 milligrams of caffeine and it's only giving you 20, or if you think you're getting 20 and you're taking 6 of them, and it has actually 100, that's going to be just, yes. So what were those places you could go to find that out?
So there are certain third-party certifications that you can get. The couple that I mentioned for sport, and then it's certified for sport, and then Informed for Sport. So those are a couple that are specifically like recognized by big organizations like the NFL, the NBA, NCAA. So they would be safe also for like if you had an athlete, who's competing, they would be safe for them too. Like they wouldn't have any banned substances in them.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, you also have to be careful because if you use it as a training run, like I tend to have a little bit of anxiety before a race, which is like bad anxiety, not good anxiety. If I will have my cup of coffee like 2 hours before I run, but I won't have a gel with caffeine right before because already I'm trying to control my heart rate a little bit by deep breaths before I start the race. And there have been races that I've had a gel and I've been standing typically in a triathlon where I'm terrified to swim. I'll be standing there and I'll be in like zone 2, just standing there.
Heartbeat. Yeah.
Like, okay, Maria, maybe we got to back off the caffeine. And oftentimes I'll use the caffeine later in the race when I'm like feeling like I need a little extra bump. Like mile 20 of a marathon, I'll save my caffeine gel till then. And I do no caffeine gels until then.
And it does take about an hour for it to to start working. And so, like, for example, if you were running a marathon and you were shooting for like 4 hours, then you would take it like at 1 hour and 2 hour. So
Yeah.
you would, alternate between like caffeinated and non-caffeinated products, because if you had only caffeinated, I'm afraid you would probably hit that 400 threshold
and
pretty
sometimes
quickly.
with those gels, you can't. It's little small print in the front that says caffeine, and sometimes you can be like, oh, that looks like a good flavor.
Yep.
I'm gonna use that, and then you're like, oh man, I just had a ton of caffeine.
Because I know that sometimes even on races, the gels that they give you have caffeine, and I have to be really careful because I don't know how my body would react because I didn't train with that. But already you're worried about GI issues anyway, especially long distance running, and so now you're adding in that surprise caffeine.
Yeah,
so
no.
I always check, and then I just take the gel. If worst comes to worst at the end, I need something, I take it, but I don't and put it in a pocket. But
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah, because you should always practice your nutrition beforehand, because you just never know how you're going to react to it. And then especially on race day, like you said, you're nervous, you're jittery,
Yeah, you got to be careful.
yeah.
If you haven't tried it in training, don't try it. Or I will tell people, if it's a less important race, like a B race, that's a good time to try it, because your body is going to react differently on race day than it does in training anyway, just because of those nerves. So you might want to try it on a day that is a race that you care about, but not super care about.
Right.
Like try a 5K first.
And then would you still try the caffeine for the 5K? I mean, do you think that do you think that's going to have an impact? Do you think is caffeine more for sprinting or for long distance, or both?
They've actually shown for both.
Okay.
Like it can help with sprint performance, but then it can also, they've done these research studies where it's like time to exhaustion, which is pretty like indicative of like a lot of the racing that we do. It's like, okay, well, especially like a marathon, it's like time to exhaustion,
And the other funny part to it is, like compression socks, I always say, if you think it's helping you, it's helping you.
That's very true. There is definitely
there's
like
a huge placebo effect.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you feel like I feel like I can't start my day without caffeine, whether you're right, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. That's me.
And I can't. And
I cannot. No.
But that's okay, because your body is very used to that. So
Yeah.
that's why you wouldn't go on race day and add a grande and a gel with caffeine, because that's not what your body is used to.
I mean,
and for me, I'm not used to anything before a run.
I always think about people that don't have coffee. Like, you always amaze me, because I'm like, I think about it when I go to bed at night. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to have coffee in the morning. Like, it is actually that powerful for me. Or like, if Luke doesn't set it the night before,
Sweet Luke.
I will not get out of bed. I will lay in bed and I'll be like, and he's like, are you coming down with me? I'm like, when I hear the coffee.
when the smell wafts up into my bedroom.
It is a very big problem in my life. But hey,
it's okay. I love my caffeine too, and I have to set it the night before, and then it's always ready for me. It's great.
and actually Jacksonville is the home of Maxwell House.
I did not know that.
Now listen, I do not like Maxwell House.
But it's good to the last
It
drop.
smells really good. Like I can smell it because I live downtown Jacksonville, and I'm like, it's very good. It's a good place for me to live.
Yes. And so, all right. So now let's go a little bit, but let's go more into these coffee things. So with cream, is that going to hurt my stomach even more if I add the cream that I normally add, or am I trying to choke this down black coffee?
There's a people that drink black coffee are next level.
I
can't do that. A little bit of cream, a little tiny bit.
Is that going to upset? I mean, like, I would never think to have milk before a run, but
Right. I mean, I think if you're doing it all of the time, your body's
If you're
used to it,
trained.
it's not really a problem. But like, if you know that you have a little bit of a lactose intolerance, don't do that.
don't do that. Okay.
I think it's interesting though, because people will say all the time, I can't do this before a run with my stomach. You can train your stomach to do most things.
Yes.
You can train your stomach. I have trained my stomach to have coffee. I've trained my stomach to eat. I've been running for 20 years the same way every day. I can switch that up. It would take some adjustment period. I mean, what is the adjustment period? Do we even know what that is? Maybe different for everybody.
It's different for
But you can
everybody.
train your body. Like people will say, I can't eat before a run. I just can't. Well, you can. You just have, your stomach is like any other muscle. You've got to be able to train it. and you have to be able to train it to take in fuel. And if you can't do that, running can be very difficult because we do need that.
That's a big pitfall people have.
Yeah. I ran on the track with Jen this morning, and we were talking about, because I'm doing that whole like bulk and cut and all this stuff. And I could tell from when I ran out of carbohydrates on our track workout this morning,
Just
like I can tell my breathing changes. Like, I just didn't have enough carbs the day before. It happens. Like, we need to know our bodies and know what we need to take in and how we need to take it in. And once you learn that, it's like, cool. You can do so many things.
I would 100% agree. And they have shown that, yes, by having caffeine, there's a benefit, but then also by having carbs too.
well, yes.
So, which, you need to be fueling anyway. So, just by having like something with the caffeine too, like a gel or whatever, then you're getting both.
Getting the carbs and the caffeine, yeah.
So let's. I want to talk more about the science because that's what I love. So when you have this caffeine, what is it doing? Because I will notice it, as Maria says, I don't have a cup of coffee till I'm at work. So I've done a lot of things. I've run. I've done so I feel like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, look how nice the world looks just for this. And I'm like, caffeine. It's a hell of a drug. That's what
It is insane. It is probably the most powerful drug we have, I think, actually, caffeine. It's very powerful.
So like, what's it doing to my brain? What's causing that sort of euphoria feeling that, what's it doing to me?
Well, so like I mentioned before, you have like adenosine receptors and that like makes you feel tired, but like caffeine actually blocks those and then sends along the good hormones. So like your norepinephrine, your epinephrine, your dopamine, and then your adrenaline. So it's almost like you're getting an adrenaline rush from it.
Okay. This is why I actually do wait until right before the newscast, because we have 4.5 hours of news. And so I like to, if I drank that cup of coffee when I got here at 2 a.m., then by 4:30 when we go in there, I feel like I've already lost some of that. So if I go right at 4 o'clock,
I just don't understand. I don't understand how do you get dressed without caffeine? Like I feel like I would shrivel up. I don't know what would happen.
But you did it for a year.
To be fair, I did. However, I had to stop all activity for 2 weeks. Like I had to not run. I had to
Tell me more about this.
Ask my husband to not divorce me for 2 weeks because I was ugly and I was exhausted.
And tell me about the headache.
I had a headache for 4 days.
Yeah.
It does go away. All that goes away.
Right.
But the fact that that's the withdrawal symptoms, I don't even drink that much coffee. It's not like I drink a tremendous amount of coffee. I have 2 cups a day. And I won't drink it after 10 o'clock. I don't drink any
in the
caffeine.
morning?
10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
I won't
that's
have
good. Yeah.
any more after 10 o'clock. And even if I have chocolate that has caffeine in it in the afternoon, I struggle to sleep. But that's crazy to me that I allow myself. That's why I did it. Because I'm like, how can I allow myself to do this?
And then go right back to it.
But haven't you seen that meme of the person that says, you can get rid of your cup of coffee and switch it for green tea because it's healthier and you can be 80% more miserable than you were before.
Right.
It's like, this is the thing that brings me joy.
That's what I was like. I was like, Maria, this brings you joy. Like, why can't, I mean, come on. It's not like I'm doing cocaine or anything.
Right.
Right.
It's caffeine is just it's a nice
And there
legal
are
drug.
some good things about caffeine.
Right.
And there's a lot of good research that says it helps with Alzheimer's. Like there are some, if you're doing anything in moderation and you're doing it well, like it's moderation, right? Like,
Yes. And we laugh in the news. I mean, I've been doing in the news now for 25 years, and there is forever a study that says caffeine and coffee is good for you, and then there'll be a study that says it is bad for you, and then it is like you can have 2 cups, and now you can only have 1 cup, and it's like,
I know.
how about we just do, in moderation. We don't try to make everything perfect all the time.
Yeah.
But yes, there's always a study about coffee, which is one of the reasons why we, or caffeine specifically, because they are always doing these, but they are not usually doing them on runners. So as with most studies, is that they're
And
they're
Jen
the
and I talked
average
about
person.
that this morning.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit what you were telling me about that
So
research.
a lot of like the research that established like the dosage and everything was based on cyclists, which I would argue that cyclists are a little bit different than runners. I feel like our stomachs are going to be a little bit more jostled by running versus being in a fixed position, on a bike. So that's one thing. And then, like in preparation for this, I read through a meta-analysis. So basically, they take a lot of different research studies and they just kind of summarize them. And only like 7.5% were done on women. So
Shocker.
I know. So, it's not really clear how it affects women either.
Yeah.
And did you find anything about cortisol and how it affects caffeine? Because I have done some research on caffeine I've changed my routine to some extent. I won't drink coffee on an empty stomach anymore. So when I get up, I have a protein shake and then I have my caffeine because there is some research that says that it will spike your cortisol too high in the morning. And then if you run on top of that, then it's even higher. So I make sure I have something in my stomach before I have caffeine. Mm-hmm. And actually, like a lot of times if you drink it on an empty stomach, you can feel kind of nauseous.
Yeah.
Maybe though. Yeah.
I mean, I've read some of what you've read too, and I don't know, cortisol is kind of an interesting topic just because people are very quick to blame it. Like there are times when I'm counseling 20-year-olds, they're like, it's my cortisol.
Yeah,
I'm
20-year-olds don't have to worry about that.
I don't think you need to worry about that yet,
Commercials that tell me
when you turn 40, you probably got to worry about it a little bit more.
Right. You just need to be more diligent with your sleep, which, for some people can be a challenge because of hormonal issues, your stress levels. You've just got a lot more going on, I would argue, than like a 20-year-old. Right. No offense, but just a little bit different stage of life.
But imagine if we were thinking, I mean, to their credit, at least whoever you were talking to, they are thinking about it in their 20s. I didn't think about it in my 20s. So maybe I could have put some good things into my body so that by the time I got to 40, it wasn't as so much of a crash landing as when.
I think that happened on our page once when Rachel was like, I shared that cottage cheese recipe on my page. And I have a really good pancake cottage cheese recipe, by the way. And I shared it, and Rachel was like, I ate that every day in college. And Leigh was like, I ate Doritos. I think you said Doritos, right? I was eating Doritos all day.
Yeah, no.
Gosh, what were you doing?
I was eating a protein pancake.
To be fair, Rachel is also a dietitian. So.
That is true. That is true. But still. So to their credit, at least they are thinking about, even if it's not the issue that they're having.
There
at least
are some responsible 20-year-olds.
Right. But I have had a couple of them say, well, I don't do like cardio because it raises my cortisol. And I'm like, wait a minute.
Oh yeah, that's very trendy right now.
I know.
Yep.
Like all the people on TikTok. Like I'm not on TikTok. I have no idea what's going on there, but I hear about it a lot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think that's where a lot of people are getting news from. And by news, I mean, obviously 45 seconds or 30 seconds of a headline or somebody interpreting the news for them in this like 30 to 45 seconds. So, which is very scary because.
Well, and especially when it comes to nutrition or running, because everything is so person specific.
Right.
I have a business of coaching because it's personally different, and Jen has a business that's based on the person too. And it's hard to do generalizations, even with a podcast. Like we talk about it all the time. Mm-hmm. There's things are so different for everybody. And there's confirmation bias, like even with studies, there's so much confirmation bias that we have to be careful about where our sources are from and where we're getting. That's why that third party source is really important that Jen brought up, because a lot of these research studies are done by the company.
Right.
With the ability
they're perfect.
Yeah. Coffee is great for you. You should have 600 milligrams a day at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Done by Starbucks.
Done by Starbucks.
Yeah. So you just have to be really careful about where you get the information from and have a very critical eye when you're listening to anything.
Mm-hmm. And both of
more
you,
so now than ever, because we just didn't have that as much before.
Yeah. And both of you have clients that are specifically running. So yours is running and yours is the nutrition for the runners. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to caffeine. What do you recommend, when you talk to someone, I know not specific, what do you ask them to try to figure out if caffeine is something that they can incorporate into their individualized training?
Mm-hmm. Well, so again, it just depends on the person. I know I've had quite a few lately that have had GI issues, so that's something we kind of steer clear of. But, there are other athletes, that are maybe looking for a performance, enhancement. So they're looking for that, 2 to 4%, which is what caffeine basically gives you.
Is it really 2 to 4%?
Yeah. I'll take that.
That's pretty good.
Because right now I don't use caffeine. I don't run before with it before or use it in my gels. But
Like
2 to 4%, if I could work my stomach into
Hold
it.
up.
Yeah.
you do have coffee every day, but on race day you don't have any coffee?
No.
You like blow my mind. Like what? You notice no difference. Well, I guess you.
Because I normally don't run with
Oh
coffee
right, you
at
don't
all.
run with
so,
caffeine when you get up. Okay.
with my new life,
With my new life,
I have a new
in my new
life.
world,
I have a
I'm
new
gonna-
life coming, and so I won't have to be quite.
Can we do an
as
experiment
diligent.
on you, Leigh? We
Yeah,
can do an
we
experiment.
can.
Yeah.
Because now
I like it.
The see if coffee before, give myself 30 minutes because right now I'm like wake up out the door in less than
Yes, you
15.
do.
Like I eat the honey stinger while I'm putting clothes on.
I used to do that too, but I used to drink my coffee like while I was getting dressed.
Okay.
Even if I just have a few sips, I'm okay. I gotta have something. Nothing. It's just miserable for everybody
But
involved.
if I then wanted to add it into my gels and things like that, it's going to take a while for my body to get used to that, right? I mean, I would imagine that you can't just.
Well, we're gonna do an experiment.
Yeah,
I like that.
I'm kind of excited.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And that's the best way to do it. Like whether you have a coach or a new dietitian, like work with them, kind of add it in, see how it's affecting you.
But 2 to 3%.
If I'm gonna do
Nice.
caffeine quickly and then go for a run, which I don't, I'm not a quick person in the morning. If I have to do that, I have to make sure there's a bathroom on my route because I will have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So you have to if you're gonna go outside of your routine with coffee, just be careful.
Yes.
Make sure there's some hotels.
Yeah.
Hotels are wonderful. Their lobbies are always open.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
usually very clean.
Or
Yeah.
if you can live by your house. I
Yeah.
have a lot of clients that do that. They're like, okay, well, I go out for a mile and then, because that was also some of what was going on. It's like, you get a mile in and it's like, oh, well, I guess I really need the bathroom.
Yeah. Go back.
If you're gonna do experiments, you got to be careful with the bathroom.
Yes. And so, same question to you. So if a client comes to you, let's say she's changing her lifestyle up, and she's going to do some experimenting. So how would then you kind of guide them into adding in this caffeine into their training?
I usually ask. I don't have a lot of runners that don't use caffeine, to be honest. Maybe it's just the tribe that I follow. I don't know. But if somebody was going to come to me and I was going to add it in, I would first, like Jen said, make sure their nutrition is right first, because caffeine can get blamed for a lot of things that it's not doing. If somebody has low energy availability or they're not getting in enough carbohydrates is typically what I see. People with digestive issues that don't have enough carbs to keep them hydrated enough to actually run well, or they're fasted. A lot of people run fasted, which is not a good idea. I would never tell you
the
to
shame
run.
that Jen just gave you. No.
I would never tell somebody to run fasted and then on top of that, caffeine. So we would first try to eat something first and get your body used to that, and then maybe add caffeine. But whenever you're experimenting with anything in running, you always want to start slow and do one thing at a time. Like, don't go try a million gels. I'm going to try 6 different kinds of gels on this run. Then you don't know which one worked and which one didn't. So you kind of got to, it's kind of annoying, but you kind of got to try something and then let it sit for a few weeks to see if it's going to work, and then add something else in a few weeks. So you can't just go gangbusters and be like, I'm going to be a caffeine runner. We kind of have to look at the whole picture.
I mean, I guess I always assumed that it would give me energy, but the blocking of the
Adenosine.
It's giving you hope, isn't it, Leigh?
yeah, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah, just a little.
just a little, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Because once
and-
you feel like you've gotten to if I've gotten to what I feel like is a threshold, this not a 2%.
Well, and caffeine gets blamed too for GI problems. Like when people they won't even think about what they ate the night before.
well, yeah.
And to me, I'm like, if you're eating high fat foods the night before, you're going to the bathroom the next day when you're working out. Like, that's happening. So, and then they could have caffeine and the caffeine made me go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it was the duck fat that you ate last night in your dinner. Like, people don't think about the night before, and it really does have an impact on how you're running. Correct, Jen?
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. And I would say even the same thing with sports nutrition. Like people are always like, oh, gels bother my stomach. Well, then maybe you need to back off and, try a little bit at a time and sip water with it. train your stomach, like you mentioned, like, because your gut
Yeah.
is a muscle.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people will drink the night before and then they'll be like, well, I had a gel and I can't eat gel before.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you drank your face off last night and now you're wondering why your stomach
But
hurts.
even if it's like, let's just say that, go back to the drinking thing. Let's say that they had their 2 cups of wine or 2 glasses of
Yeah.
wine with dinner that they always have.
Yep.
And now now they're trying to do a long run on Saturday. So they
Yeah.
did this on Friday and did this on, and so they may not think that it was that because that's what they have every night. But
Yeah.
now you're trying to add a 2-hour run. You're also adding in, you're getting up at a different time. Like your body's a little off because it's not your normal
Yeah.
time to wake up. So again, you have to kind of think about
And
everything.
and we're back to the stories you tell yourself, right? Like, be careful about the stories you tell yourself. Once I tell myself a story in my head, I'm like, ooh, can that be changed? I actually say it out loud. Wait, can I change that? Because once you say you are this way, you're that way. Like, it doesn't matter if you can or can't use caffeine. If your mind thinks you can't, you can't. So we had to be careful about all of those things. I'm just a fasted runner. I don't eat before I run. Well, okay.
But you could be a better runner if
And you could feel a lot better and you could
Yeah.
do a lot less damage to your body.
Yeah.
It's the same with anything in life. Like running, we say running is a metaphor for life. It's always a metaphor for life. Almost always. Even yesterday when I was like, my kids left again this weekend and I was so sad. And one of my other runner friends was like, it's like a running metaphor. It's never easier, but you get stronger. I'm like, gosh darn that running. It is always a metaphor for life.
It is. And sometimes in life you need caffeine.
Sometimes.
Sometimes every day, sometimes not as every day.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that all signs point to this is not a terrible thing. It's not smoking. Like the caffeine
No.
can be a helpful thing if you implement it right. And
it can change as you go. Like
Right.
that's the one thing I don't think people realize. Your body is always changing. So in my 20s, I could drink coffee all day. I was notorious for being at Starbucks at 4:00, doing work and drinking a coffee. No problem. If I did that right now, I would be up all night. Like your body is changing. You got to be willing to adjust with it. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
don't be so afraid to adjust.
And I guess your clients, the 20-year-olds, are what but I imagine it's people come to you asking about nutrition as they have maybe started to get a little older and their bodies aren't handling that 4:00 coffee very well. They're not handling the fatty foods at night anymore. And now it's like, okay, so now what do I do? I'm assuming that's where you actually get most of your clients.
Sure. I mean, yes, later on in life when things start to happen and your body doesn't respond like it did when you were in your 20s or even your 30s. And I know we can all agree that is the case.
40s were weird, man.
Yeah, and you could be frustrated all you want. But people are stubborn. They're like, no, this worked for me in my 20s. I see it with running a lot. People are like, well, I used to do hard workouts all the time. I could do 3 a week. And I'm like, okay, but you can't now. Like 3 a week is going to break you in your 40s. 3 workouts in a week, especially living in Florida, will break you. And I could have done that in my 20s. No problem. We're different. We got to adjust. And that's why the comparison thing is hard, because you got to make sure you're not comparing yourself to your old self and what your old self could do in order to keep improving as you get older. You got to be willing to adjust.
Yep. It makes a big difference.
Caffeine
you know,
amount, it's got to be an
Caffeine amounts,
adjustment.
food amounts,
All
sleep
of it.
amounts,
stress.
hormone amounts. They're all, so, as we start to maybe implement some sort of caffeine regimen into our lives, main things we need to also keep in mind is it's going to interrupt our sleep. Like you don't add in so much that it's going to impact our sleep, but also make sure that, again, you're not using that as energy that should be coming from the things that you're eating, correct?
Yes. Or even like to keep you awake because you only, had 6 hours of sleep the night before, which
that's
for some
bad.
people that's normal, but for most I would say it's probably not.
Yeah, and let's be clear, there is too much caffeine. Like caffeine can severely damage you if you have too much.
Yeah, I think FDA says like 400 milligrams
400,
a
which
day.
is not, it's not that much. Like you think it's a lot.
Like you said, it's like 2 Celsiuses, and I see people drink them all day.
Yeah, no. You got to be really careful about, and people are mixing stuff, like mixing caffeine with like vodka, like, and Red Bull, like Red Bull and vodka. Like,
Right.
don't do stuff like that. That's very dangerous for your heart. And I think people don't realize that because it's around all the time, caffeine, like your heart, and we're asking our heart to do a lot by exercising anyway. And yes, we're getting it stronger, but there is a limit. There's a limit. So be careful with caffeine. And you should know, you'll start to, your heart will start to race. You can tell when you've had too much caffeine, right? You guys can tell, or if it's just me.
I haven't had it in a long time, but I can recall going, like in college, we'd go to this coffee shop and it was like you could spend $1, you could get a cup of coffee, you could refill it as many times as you wanted to.
Dangerous.
And so I'd go back to class, and I remember taking an exam one time and I'm like, I can't, my hand is shaking. Like I can't make it stop.
Yes. So maybe you should have stopped at one cup before that,
Right.
but how do you know that, when you're experimenting like that, like you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm just drinking this coffee. Now, maybe it's the same thing
yeah.
right now is where if we're going out for a run and we have 3 gels with caffeine, you might be like, okay, that was too many. Well, that's why we practice.
Yeah, I had that one Gasparilla a few years back where Joan Benoit Samuelson came and Meb came, and we were going to the dinner. You remember that
Oh,
dinner?
yes,
Yeah.
that dinner. Yes.
I was so excited about it. And I worked the expo all day, and the Zip Fizz people were right next to me, and they kept making me a Zip Fizz. And I didn't even pay attention. I didn't know that it even had caffeine in it. I'm like, this stuff is delicious. I drank it all day. And I was already hyped up because I'm like, Joni's coming.
You were very hyped.
I love Joni. And I lay down and I did not sleep one wink that night. And then I was like, why did I not sleep? Was I that excited? And I looked at the back of that, and I swear I must have had.
Yeah.
Oopsies.
Yeah.
And
It
you
did
do
not.
need to be careful.
You have to be
it's
careful. Like it didn't say
Yeah.
anywhere. Like now I know, obviously, Maria, Zip Fizz. Like let's be real here. But I was working in Expo. I didn't even think anything of it.
And you're thirsty and tired. And, yeah.
You gotta look at what's in things, and even with chocolate and stuff, because chocolate has, how much does chocolate have? I mean, I suppose it probably depends on the chocolate.
Yeah, it does. And then the level of, it does.
Is that
depend.
this? I wonder if it's the same with dark chocolate as it is with light chocolate and light roast and dark roast.
I don't know.
I have so many questions. I'm gonna have to do another whole podcast.
Yeah.
on this.
more talk about caffeine. Maria's like,
I'm gonna go home and look up useless information on caffeine.
All right. Well, on that note, you do you.
You do you.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna
I'm
let
gonna do
Maria,
me when I
Maria
get
talk
home.
in her coach's drill. You do you.
Yeah, so it's a little bit about what we already talked about, but when you figure out what works for you and caffeine, stick with it, and don't be swayed by other people online. Don't get swayed by new products that have new types of caffeine or new types of gels or whatever. If you find what works, stick with it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just go do it and make your race day special. That's all I got.
That's all we got. See, she's getting shorter and shorter.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, it's obviously, as we've talked about, it's very individualized. You
Yeah.
love your coffee, and you
Yeah.
haven't had any in a long time. Is that what you're?
No, I
Oh,
love coffee.
Okay, all right,
I
just
love
making
coffee.
sure.
The timer's on every morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my runners, and actually Matt Fitzgerald in his 80-20 book, or maybe I'm not sure it was that book, one of his other books. He talks about restricting caffeine for the 2 weeks before your race.
And I have heard that too.
Yeah. I've never tried it. I have had some runners try it and they love it. And it's mostly because you get those benefits more if you,
Right.
your body gets used to caffeine like any other drug. And so if you use it on race day, it's more effective for that 2 to 4% if you have taken. I
that would
refuse
also-
to do that because I'm a recreational runner, and that would make the 2 weeks before not fun.
Well, my thing would be like, is my body then not adjusted to it for the GI issues? That would be,
Yeah,
like, okay,
that's-
so now I went 2 weeks without it, but now, it's like doing something
It's-
different on race day.
Yeah, if you're going to do that, you got to be willing to take a risk.
Yeah.
That's the risk you're taking.
Which hopefully, if you build up enough, and
The 2 weeks before would be just so miserable. Like I can't even imagine why I would want to do that. I'm not. I guess
I love that your love of caffeine is so intense that you can't even imagine someone doing it. Like
I would give up my running. I would give up my running before I gave up my caffeine. And I love running.
You do love running, but I did not know that your love of caffeine was this,
It runs
this
deep.
intense.
You can ask Luke sometime. He laughs at me. Like that day I cried, he was like, "You're acting like your nephew right now, like your little nephew."
You're little.
I'm sorry. It's okay. We all have our thing, right?
Yeah, but it
Don't
clearly...
judge me, Leigh.
I'm not judging. I just did not know that it ran that deeply. I mean, it's impressive.
It is kind of. Well, I think you're impressive for different reasons because you don't drink it. So,
well, and I've started now. Because I used to always wait, and I would make the cup of coffee here. So now, because I'm trying to get more protein in, I'm in my 40s. So now I do.
you can put collagen. You can put collagen
Well,
in your
no,
coffee.
I do the protein coffee, like iced coffee. So like it's like a mix.
There's a thing?
Yeah.
Oh,
but
yeah.
but it doesn't. It's not hot coffee. Like you don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, well, no.
So,
I
right.
don't do
So I knew that. Yeah. So you shake it up just like you would do like any sort of mix. It's just a mix, and it tastes like coffee, and it's cold. You ice.
Look at you being so smart.
So now I drink that instead because now I do protein.
Gotta do protein. Protein. It is really important. Protein. That's kind of brilliant, actually.
So
Protein in your coffee.
Yeah, I've got quite a few clients that do that too, and it's smart. Good way to get it in.
I learned something new today.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
All
I'll be
right.
glad to. I'll give you the two kinds that I use, so you can decide if you want
I'll
to.
try
But
it. Although I do.
I did wonder if you could then like mix it and then put it in the microwave.
Well, you want to know a fun fact when
Yeah.
I stay at your house? I used to get up in the morning and go to Starbucks on my way to, and then I was like, I feel unsafe on the road driving when I haven't had coffee. So I actually make a cup at your house now before I go because I can't do it. I feel like I'm.
Maria. I mean, I'm not judging, but I mean, there's some judgment in there somewhere where you can't. You feel like you can't.
Well, fun
drive.
facts today. Fun facts.
You feel like, well, next time you could take. Well, you can try. There's not going to be another next time.
I mostly just worry about a zombie apocalypse. Like, what happens if something comes and there's no way to make coffee? What am I going to do?
Well, then you'll have the protein mix the coffee protein mix. Because actually,
If anybody's worried about zombie apocalypse,
when we didn't have power after the hurricanes, I was fine because all my neighbors got together and they would go get coffee from Starbucks or whatever that was open, and I was like, no, I had the protein mix. So
You're super cute, Leigh. That's awesome. I love that for you.
I'll share. I think it's called Infinity.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you guys. This is, as we said, this is the penultimate episode. Next week will be the last episode of this iteration of Run for Fun. And 2 years has gone by. This is Jen's second time being on.
Yes, Jen, thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're
We
welcome.
always love
Thank
to have
you.
Yeah, wealth of information about caffeine and
if you
running.
need help with nutrition, reach out to Jen. She's very good.
Optimized nutrition. And I guess will be it.
All
We'll
right.
say goodbye next week.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.